everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is Cameron Bell. I am your host, as always, on Extra, and it is my privilege and pleasure to be speaking to you today alongside my very good friend, Ross Hutton. Ross, thank you very much for joining me on this week.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Cammy. Thanks for having me.
Ross, a little bit of a tricks of the trade. We're recording this almost immediately after finishing up the Olympiacos game. Listen, a great result, I think, across in what was a very difficult atmosphere. We'll talk about the lineups, we'll talk about the breakdown of the game, etc. But how are you feeling at the moment?
Listen, I feel good. I think a lot of people will have listened to the post-match that went out last night, where myself, yourself, and David done a really big deep dive into the game, of course, as you do in the post-match. But I know we're recording not long after that, but my thoughts are really, really positive. Rangers have put themselves in a really good position to get out of this group, this league table, whatever you want to call it. I made the point on the post-match, Cammy, that we could have been in a really difficult position going into the next run of games. So when the fixtures got released, not necessarily the clubs would be playing, but when the fixtures came out and you looked at the run of 4 games we have here, Olympiacos away, Nice away, Tottenham at home, Man United away, we could have been in a really sticky situation here. See if we hadn't picked up the points at the start of our European campaign, and we are sitting here on, as David said in the post-match last night, 3 points, then we could have been in a really sticky wicket. We could have really been struggling to try and get out of this group. I think because you have this run of 4 games, including the Olympiacos game in it, it puts more pressure on the games at the start of the European campaign to go and pick up points. Malmo away, for example. Okay, Lyon at home, we got an absolute chasing, and then we done the business against Bucharest as well. But that was really, really important that we got 6 points from those 3 games going into this little mini run here, because it takes the pressure off slightly. We've got USG in the distance at the end of January. That's a game I would expect us to win, and it's been said right throughout this that 9 points should be enough to get you out the group. But what the result against Olympiacos has done is ease that pressure slightly and put us in an even better position to go and get out of this league phase and qualify for European football after January. So I don't think you can go to the Conference League champions away in Greece and be disappointed or critical of a point. I'm really, really happy with that.
And it's something that we've made mention, and I wanted to ensure that we spoke about this as well, was that we've questioned the character of this Rangers team thus far this season. There's been some big holes in it, and we can refer people back to previous pods when we start to assign some of those holes to the board, the team, the manager. But one of the things when I was looking at it in the build up to last night's game, Ross, was it's a tough atmosphere to go to. Olympiacos, as you've rightly said, are not mugs. They will have looked at their fixture list as we did and think, okay, Rangers at home, we can probably do that. That's not too bad. So there's a fair opportunity for us to be able to have wilted under that pressure and in that atmosphere. And I think, aside from a few shaky moments, and again, we'll talk about the goal that Olympiacos scored against us in just a moment, but by and large, I just felt that we never, ever looked out of the occasion. We weren't overawed. We didn't allow the environment to stifle us. And I'm very, very pleased to be able to see that from the players. And that's something that we've been looking for. And I think we always try to be balanced in heart and hand. So when we do see it, we have to be able to give it praise. And I think that's something that we have to be able to call out, that the players didn't feel like as if it was going to be beyond them to be able to go across there and get something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on, particularly after a tricky run domestically and a tricky run of results domestically, the way at Kilmarnock, away at Aberdeen, and then you have this fixture on the horizon and a cauldron of an atmosphere, and you're thinking to yourself, well, that's really good because our players are famously very mentally resilient in these situations, so that's fantastic. Being sarcastic, but they were against Olympiacos, and I think that's the remarkable thing. Now, there is a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde situation going on with Rangers in Europe versus Rangers domestically. That's nothing new. That's a bit of a situation where the more things change, the more they stay the same. The faces have changed, the managers have changed, but there is still this thing about Rangers where when we play in Europe, we do seem to be a wee bit more at ease with ourselves than what we are playing away in the league, for instance. And one of the points I made as well, Cammy, is that in comparison to games where we've played poorly domestically, you think, and Pataudry where we go into half-time, a goal down, we need a reset from the manager. Okay, the second half was far from good, but I don't think it was, by any objective measure, as bad as the first half. It's a low bar, right enough. I'm not doing them any kind of service there, but it was slightly better. But you needed that half-time reset from the manager. Then, of course, you have the League Cup semi-final against Motherwell. We go in a goal down, having played poorly. We need the reset from the manager at half-time. And then we come out the second half and play better again and obviously get the result. When we went a goal down against Olympiacos, obviously in that atmosphere, it's in the second half already. You don't have the opportunity of that half-time reset. And I think what the players do deserve a lot of credit for. And not a lot of that has been forthcoming lately because they've not deserved it. But what they do deserve credit for in this instance is actually sorting themselves out on the pitch. And that's not something that can be said of them a lot lately. And I think they do deserve a lot of credit for that because, as I said, they've put themselves in these positions where they've needed this reset. They've not had this opportunity, but they've managed to go show a bit of character, show a bit of resolve, show a bit of grit, and go and get themselves back into the game and get away with a point. So I do think they deserve a lot of credit for that.
The starting lineup, I think, raised a few eyebrows as well, Ross, and there was a couple of kind of key elements of this. Firstly, it was the defence with Dujon Sterling starting at right back rather than James Tavernier. Robin Proper came back into the centre of defence. And I thought that was quite interesting. James Tavernier has not been playing well this season. I think, as I say, we've covered that a lot in terms of previous podcasts. Proper having to come in because Balogun's been overused. He was never going to be able to play a long consecutive run of games. What was your thoughts on obviously Tav coming into the bench and Proper starting at centre half? Feel as if that was the correct decision in both counts?
I think you can maybe see the Tav call coming, given the way that the second half on Sunday panned out. I know it was spoken about on commentary. I was at the game. It was spoken about around me in the stands, same as yourself, Cammy. That when Tav went off, it did feel a wee bit like the penny was beginning to drop for the manager. That Tav is not what he was, and it doesn't give me any satisfaction to say that because I'm a massive fan of James Tavernier, but he's not contributing the same way that he has in the past. And you do at that point need to look at other options, captaincy or no captaincy. So I think you can maybe see that coming in the post, given the fact that Tavernier was taken off on Sunday and the manager did start to look at other options when he brought Sterling on. I know obviously the manager had said during the week as well that Sterling wasn't fit to play the full 90 minutes against Olympiacos, and I also thought it was incredibly telling that when it was time for Sterling to come off, he didn't look to Tavernier to go into replacement, was Casemiro. So there is a wee bit of a changing of the guard going on there. I think it'll be very interesting to see what he does on Sunday against Hearts. I don't want to preempt that discussion, Cammy, but there are different skill sets required for different games. When you're playing away to, as I said, the Conference League champions, away in Athens, where you don't have a lot of the ball and you maybe do need to defend a lot more than you would domestically, then yeah, that possibly does lend itself to Sterling a wee bit. Casemiro, we've had a limited opportunity to view him at this stage. It is still relatively early days. But what we do know of him, Cammy, is he does like to get forward. He does have a really good delivery on him. You and I spoke about this actually on Extra just after the last international break when he was playing away for the Dutch under-21s and he got 2 absolutely fantastic assists. So we've seen that in his game, if not necessarily for us yet, in more general senses. He might be a wee bit more suited to playing right back domestically. That's just a kind of thought that I have in my head. But you're right, the fact that Tav isn't now the go-to man, and it took until, 85 minutes for him to come on for a bit of fresh legs, I think it does say a lot in the fact that obviously the Proper came in for Balogun, possibly because of that right back situation, tells its own story as well, that it had to get quite far down the pecking order line for Proper to be considered to come in as a centre back option. I think probably ideally if Sterling was fully fit and could have lasted the 90, it would have been Sterling on the right hand side of the defence and then Casemiro playing at centre back, which we know he can play as well, and that speaks to how difficult Robert Proper has found life at Rangers, which is really disappointing to say because I was quite excited about that signing over the summer. You keep hearing these comparisons to Ben Davies and the struggles that he had at Rangers, and the resemblance, at least in playing style, does seem a wee bit uncanny. And again, I hate to say it, but there seems to be a wee bit of a soft underbelly to Robin Proper, which is really disappointing. It doesn't lend itself well to Scottish football at all, the challenges that we face. But having said that, I think the defence as a whole had a really good game against Olympiacos. They kept them relatively quiet throughout that, so in that sense, I've got no complaints.
And the other big change, now we knew in the build up to it as well, we had some injury update on Tom Lawrence. Looks like it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks, probably going to be 3 months, knowing our luck with injuries, Ross. But Tom Lawrence, I think he's divisive amongst the fan base. I think it's fair to say. He has contributed at times, other times he hasn't. The manager had the option of being able to look at bringing Nadim Bedrani into the 10 role. He stuck with Mohamed Diomande. I understand the argument for being able to play Bedrani through the middle. And I think at some point we will see it, by the way, given what the manager has shown that he is now open to change. But I'll be honest with you, I wasn't necessarily disappointed with this. I felt that, similar to as you've just mentioned with the defence, it might have been a little bit square peg round hole to be able to do it at the moment, unless we had someone else who could play out the left-hand side. Now, domestically, that could be your opportunity if you talk about bringing Yanis Hadji into that equation, and that maybe allows Bedrani to come in. But I'll be honest with you, I thought Diomande played well against Olympiacos. I thought Bedrani started to come into it. He's definitely got an attacking prowess that we can use, and I think we're starting to see some good variation on either side with Cherny and also Bedrani in terms of where the danger threat comes from. But as I say, the number 10's still, I think, a position that we need to start to formulate a more constant plan around.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think there's kind of two factors there with regards to where Bedrami's had to play out on the left-hand side. The first of all being the fact that Tom Lawrence, up until his injury, was actually in a bit of a purple patch. He was contributing, he was scoring goals, he was scoring big goals that were winning games. And I believe you and I have spoken about this on here before, Cammy, and I've said, and I would stick with that, if a player's playing well in a position, doesn't matter if you've signed somebody else to play there for big money. If you're playing well, then the jersey's yours, and it's yours to lose. Obviously, Tom Lawrence has done that through now being injured, so you can start to look at maybe moving Bedrani into the number 10 position. But that brings us on to the other issue, which is the paucity of options that we have out in the left wing. Now, obviously, that would normally be Oscar Cortes. That hasn't particularly worked out yet, and to be fair to Bedrani, as much as it's not his natural position, I think everyone knows he'd rather play as a 10. He's beginning to make it his own. I would totally agree. I think you're beginning to see threats developing from the right and the left wing, which is what we have been crying out for years, Cammy, to have proper players in there who can provide direct threats. Cherny as well, I think, deserves a lot of praise. I think he was really good again against Olympiacos, but he's another one who's really growing into that role. I think where he was after Leon, we just missed that sitter. He spoke very openly about how that had impacted him mentally, but the way he's bounced back has been quite remarkable, to be honest, to do it in such a short space of time. I think he deserves a lot of credit for him in particular, because he seems to be somebody who's incredibly brave. We speak about it on the network all the time, Cammy, that bravery is not just running about hitting people on a football pitch. It's when the chips are down, or you're in a tough game, or in a tough moment, demanding the ball because you believe you can make something happen. And given where, as I said, Cherny was to where he is now, the fact that he can go to those two extremes is quite impressive, to be honest. So I think he deserves a lot of credit as well. But hopefully moving forward, we do see more of Bedrani in the number 10 role, and that includes Oscar Cortes coming back so he can provide that threat down the left. And hopefully, that's doing a lot of heavy lifting, but hopefully at that point we have a wee bit more of a complete picture of what our attacking options can look like. Because Clement, for all the criticism that I've been giving him, and a lot of Rangers fans have been giving him, he has struggled with injuries. He's not had a full complement of players to often play at any one given time, which has been unfortunate, but you need to make the best of what you've got. I think, as I said, Bedrani's been quite good at doing that out in the left wing.
Well, the three players that we've not really spoken about, we're about to now. Let's start with the positives first, Ross. We mentioned before that we approached the game, I think, with the right tempo, the right attitude. I thought Olympiacos would look, they would look to play with a high intensity. And we set out well, I think, from the start of the game. And then we started to show what we can do within the middle of the park. And as you rightly say, Olympiacos would have looked to be able to try and capitalise on their experience and where we've been at in terms of recent form. But two players that did not allow that to happen throughout the entire game were Conor Barron and Nico Raskin. I think that we've spoken long and hard about the fact that Conor Barron has been a fantastic signing, taking the step up from Aberdeen into Rangers, and how he's been able to implement a lot of that domestically. Where we've had poor games, it tends to have been due to the fault of others, and certainly not Conor Barron. Nico Raskin, I think, is really, really impressed me. He's obviously played a good number now of consecutive games, had a long layoff because of injury. But I think throughout the first half of this game, what you started to see, what probably took Olympiacos and certainly their fans by surprise, was these two players being able to just work tirelessly through the entire corridor of the park. So, and by that, what I mean is being able to cover ground, being able to make sure that they were hassling and harrying the opposition players, trying to get control of second balls, being able to play nice passing that was either short range or long range, and being able to try and create play. They were pretty much everywhere. And for me, these two within that partnership dynamic, it's really unearthed something very, very special. And the reason why I call them out is for very differing reasons. As I say, Barron, his first season at Rangers, I don't think, with Leon aside, and he was not the only one, by the way, that he's looked overawed in the European stage, and Raskin for coming back and been able to really turn the dial as much as he had. You've made mention there about where we want players to be brave. I've asked for players to take responsibility and to take accountability for what they're doing, and Raskin for me is absolutely showing that. I thought the two of them were absolutely immense tonight.
They were absolutely tremendous, and it's almost difficult to throw enough praise at them for the performances they put in, and we don't want to go over the top or be over effusive in that praise, but credit is due where it's due, Cammy, and I thought they were absolutely tremendous. A lot was spoken about in the build-up to the game about how Olympiacos like to press high and press in numbers, and I think that was a big concern for us going into it, because let's face it, not usually the calmest on the ball, and if I wanted to be completely hypercritical, I think some of the use of the ball in our own final third was quite poor. At times we played ourselves into a wee bit of bother, but in those moments where Olympiacos did, get the ball back and they were driving forward, you had one of Barron or Raskin on them to try and turn the ball over for us, and I think that was the most impressive thing, is that they seemed to just be everywhere at every moment on the pitch. There was a moment in the first half where I think Cherny had the ball down the right hand side, and Barron was almost overlapping him to try and get in there to get a cross in, which, given the amount of energy he would then have had to expend to get back into the middle of the park to be back in position, was quite remarkable. I do believe in, I think you can probably go and pick out a number of really good performances that Conor Barron has had since he joined Rangers, but for me that probably was his best. Not just because of his own individual performance, but the level that he managed to put it in at. This is not him going in against, well, due respect, St Mirren or St Johnstone and snapping into tackles and winning the ball back high up the park for us. This is him doing it at a really, really good Europa League level against what is a top side. So I think for his own development, his own story at Rangers and his journey so far, he deserves a lot of credit for that. Raskin, on the other hand, he's not had his troubles to seek with injury. We all know that he's not played an immense amount of football for Rangers over the last few seasons because of that. He'd fallen out of favour a wee bit. But I think that makes his, I don't want to call it a redemption arc because it's far too soon for that, but his performance is all the more sweet because we all want to see him do well. I think we know the quality of the player that we did sign. I don't think we've saw that too much from him. So if this is the beginning of him finally finding his feet properly at Rangers and delivering the kind of performances I think we all know he's capable of, then we'll be all the better for it. And if that can complement Conor Barron in there as well, then absolutely fantastic. I don't need Conor Barron to do the sexy things in this side. That's not what he's there for. That's not what we signed him for. What I do need him to do is that one specific job very well. And he done that against Olympiacos. And if you show that same level of grit and desire and determination to go and snap into challenges and win the ball back fairly and turn it over high up the park against Scottish sides, and we're going to get an awful lot of joy in there. I understand that it's different when you're playing against a low block. It's maybe your Motherwells of the world are quite happy to sit in and let you have a lot of the ball and you're not having the opportunity to do that. But that makes it all the more important when you do. So if we can see that same level of intensity against Scottish sides, then we're going to be much better for it down the line, Cammy.
Yeah, and coming on to the third player that we need to talk about as well, Rangers, I think, went in at half-time, Ross. I think they would have been pretty pleased with how we'd taken our approach to the game. There wasn't a need, as we have seen so recently, for a second half reset, and we get a bit of a kind of, I will call it a bit of a sucker punch, because I don't know if this was as clear cut a great Olympiacos goal to give them the lead as we would have liked, because well, we did have chances in the first half. As I say, I think that we managed to kind of pen them in pretty well. Olympiacos score. The Rangers' defence for me is all at sea at this point. It's a poor goal to lose, albeit that the finish is absolutely exquisite. And then, just a few short minutes later, up pops the man of many conversations, Cyriel Dessers. Dessers had missed a couple of chances in the first half, Ross. His inclusion was obvious because we knew that the manager would have picked him to be able to start with. Igamani, for me, is far too raw at the moment to be able to start games at the moment, and certainly at this stage. But Cyriel Dessers comes up with what has to be absolutely all due credit deserved, a fantastic goal. Olympiacos defender commits to be able to come into him, overruns it slightly, but Dessers has the forethought to be able to just put a little touch in the ball, just to be able to allow himself to retain control of it, and then a lovely slotted finish. He does go on later in the game to have another couple of chances, certainly one in which where he should have squared the ball, I think, across to either Bajrami or Diomande. But for me, this is where you're going to get all of those conversations that I'm sure that we had last night. Dessers isn't doing enough. He's missing far too many chances. He pops up with this goal, and it's peak Cyriel Dessers for me, because you have to take all of the shite alongside the sugar. There's no doubt to my mind, by the way, that we need to prioritise a striker as our recruitment in January. There is absolutely no doubt whatsoever. But it's what Cyriel Dessers does. He will give you joy. He will give you frustration, and was ever thus. And by the way, I don't think it's going to change. I have made mention a lot that my hope was against St Mirren. He makes a game-changing sub to bring Cyriel Dessers on. Dessers sets up the winner for Vlavkav Cherny. He obviously scores against Motherwell to be able to get us back in the game in the League Cup semi-final. And it's doesn't maintain his levels of confidence. He got some degree of confidence from the goal for the remaining part that he played in the game. But this is what Cyriel Dessers does, and it's why, I mean, his highlight reel must be absolutely phenomenal when you take in the great goals that he scored. But the chances that he misses, we're going to get, hopefully, into the latter stages of the Europa League. We will not get chances that he needs all the time. It's just, it's who he is, and it's what he does.
Yeah, Cyriel Dessers seems to be the absolute epitome of you can't make a rainbow without some rain. This is just the Cyriel Dessers story at Rangers. We all know this now. This is nothing new. And I think what he is and how he has been for Rangers was just encapsulated in that entire 90 minutes, because you're right, you had those two chances in the first half. The one where he goes clean through on the keeper. Okay, he might have been offside, but he still fluffs the shot. Anyway, in that position, you just have to score. And then if you're offside, then so be it. And I can accept that if you're playing off the shoulder against the high line, sometimes you'll be caught. But go and do your job and make sure that you actually make the line to make a decision first. The absolute sitter that he missed in the first half, and it was a sitter at that level as a striker, you need to be able to take those chances, was almost inexcusable. But this is Cyriel Dessers, you know what you're getting from him at this point. Cherny does some fantastic work. He puts it on a plate for him, and at that level, against that level of opposition, you might not get another couple of chances within a game. And this kind of comes to the big frustration that we all have with Dessers, Cammy, is that in those really tight games, whether that be against Celtic or away at Pittodrie or Rugby Park, when you maybe only will get one or two chances in a game, is he clinical enough to take them? No, he's not. But when you have a game that is a wee bit more like Olympiacos, where you maybe can make a couple more chances than that, then he's more than likely to take one of them. That's just not going to cut it for us in the big moments, in the big games. However, full credit to him, and again, a lot of this pod is giving credit where it's due, because I do think they fully deserved it. The finish for the actual goal is an absolute perler, Cammy. It's an absolute perler. And the one time that you actually can't criticise him for delaying, taking a touch, he sells the defender fantastically, and then the finish is exquisite. The hardest of the 3 chances, ironically, to take, but he does it so well. And then you go back to the frustration again, back down in the pits, where he could have played in Cherney. Moments after that, go on and win 2-1. No, he doesn't. He decided to go and take a shot on himself from an impossible angle. But this is just what you get from Dessers. Now, acknowledging that fact does not make it any less frustrating in the moment. It's never going to. But I think we all know enough about him to just accept this is the way it is. And by that I totally agree with you. In January, we need to go and get another striker in, which maybe sounds ridiculous because you'd maybe have Dessers, Danilo, Igaman +1, but to have that consistent quality in there, we need support. If it's a loan option, fair enough, I can understand that, but we need support and reinforcements in there because we can't keep continuing like this. This is why we drop points. Obviously, great result in Greece, fantastic, but it punishes you across the board of a league season, and I think we've seen that already.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, El Kaabi showed with his goal, doesn't need a lot of opportunities, but when he gets it, it's a fantastic, and that's probably brought home to me, I think, Ross, that as you rightly say, we can't have a number of chances because we will not get a number of chances. I'm not even talking, by the way, about Spurs and Man United. I don't even mean that. I just mean, even as you've said there, domestically, as teams have obviously gotten wise to it, but you need to be able to bring in someone. Well, not as you say, if it's going to be a loan, if it's going to be a permanent thing, I don't know, because I despise the January window. I think it's a real gamble at times, but it ultimately needs to be able to be improved. We saw the game out, I think, Ross, pretty comfortably, and I say that with all due respect to the fact that we had to work hard to be able to earn the point. And an interesting change just with 5 minutes to go was we did a triple substitution. James Tavernier, Hamza Igaman and Ross McCausland coming on. The Tavernier one, I think, for me was interesting. We mentioned earlier on that he was benched. The manager did replace Dujon Sterling about 10 minutes or so into the second half with Casemiro. That, for me, I thought was quite telling because he didn't want to showing up any of the defence at that point. He felt the team were playing well enough and he thought Casemiro could contribute to that. When he did make the triple change with about 5 minutes left of regular time, 10 as it turned out with injury, it made sense. We wanted to be able just to make sure that we didn't concede a late one, which would have been a real, I'd say a real blow to us, given how well we played, how we'd applied ourselves into it. And he did at that point obviously bring on Tavernier to be able to just play slightly further forward than he would usually, just to be able to kind of control the game. And for me, this is again where I come back. He didn't have too many touches of the ball, Igaman, apart from the one where he kicked it away and got a booking. There is a point here where you need to be able to use your squad pragmatically. You need to be able to use the resources that are at hand. And we did see the game out. A really, really great decision by Nico Raskin right at the death to be able to take a card to stop a chance coming through, which fortunately came to nothing. But all in all, the fact that we've got a point across in Greece where we may come away from it slightly disappointed we didn't get all three is the chances that you've mentioned we weren't able to capitalise on. But overall, in terms of our Europa League performances thus far this season, I think this has been a really, really strong performance from us.
It has, and amongst a number of really strong performances as well, particularly away from home, which I think is the remarkable thing there. Obviously, kicking it off away in Malmo, we had that fantastic win. As we've mentioned, Lyon was a bit of a hiding, right, okay, but they are a much, much better team than we are. I still think a Rangers team in European campaigns gone by might have given them a better game, but we were beaten by a better team. I think I'm gracious enough to hold our hands up there and acknowledge that. Done the biz as we should have done against Steaua Bucharest, and that's put us in the position where we've gone into this run of 4 games of Olympiacos, these Spurs and Man United, where the pressure isn't quite the same as what it would have been had we'd mucked up more than one of those games. We put ourselves in a great position to go and not have that intense level of pressure on us, needing to go and get points. Obviously, it's fantastic that we did, and that eases the pressure slightly again when we go into this run of 3 games before USG. But it wouldn't have been an absolute catastrophic disaster had we not done so. What you do hope this result and performance will do, Cammy, is give us confidence to go on and do do a lot better than we have been doing in the league. There seems to be this strange Jekyll and Hyde thing, as I mentioned, going on between Rangers in Europe and Rangers in the league, which isn't anything new. And I maybe do sound like a broken record in pods in years gone by when I say that I hope that the confidence boost we'll get from going away to tough places in Europe or beating good opposition in Europe will translate to the league. It's a different challenge, I understand that. But it should serve as a nice wee timely reminder to the players that they are good footballers. They're certainly better than most of the teams in Scotland. So if we can go out, beat Hearts on Sunday, which I know we'll talk about in a wee minute, and put ourselves in a really good frame of mind going into the international break, then we can just take a breather and reset and then come back for what will be a really tough schedule going into Christmas and the New Year.
Well, that's Philippe Clement, and I did say that I wanted it to be completely fair. The manager has come under a lot of deserved criticism so far across the course of this season. But that's now 6 consecutive European away matches under Philippe Clement where he's been unbeaten. The record is 7, which was set by Steven Gerrard. And I fully anticipate that we are going to go to Nice and put on a good show of ourselves. I think it sets us up very nicely to be able to try and almost to a certain extent guarantee the latter stages of the Europa League, Ross. And listen, I'm absolutely delighted for the team and the play, and I suppose the team, but the players that we've talked about who needed some of that confidence injection, that little bit of that self-belief. We hope, obviously, that it translates then into how we perform domestically. But for some of those players who, as we've kind of mentioned there, have been in and out the squad, who have started but not started well, who have come back from injury, most important thing is that they take this now as I suppose really where we stay. This is where we can set the standard and set the bar to say that's what we're capable of doing with our performances. Because tonight was not about the space that Olympiacos could give us. Like we saw other teams being able to try and provide a space that we could capitalise on. But tonight, for me, it was about hard work. It was about industry. It was about playing smart football and taking care of the football. Again, another criticism I've had of some of these players. So almost individually and collectively, my hope is that they take a lot from that performance and getting a draw across in Greece.
Yeah, completely, and that is the kind of big hope for us going forward, because it's nice being able to do it on the European stage, Cammy. We all enjoy it. We all love a European campaign season in, season out, but the main priority was, and always shall be domestic football. So it's all well and good being able to go in and put on a good performance in Europe and go and give us nights like this because we love it. But we'd love it even more if you can go away to Pittodrie or Rugby Park and do the business in the league as well. That's not wanting to come across as ungrateful for the evenings that we've had in Europe. It's just a fact. I think we would all prefer it if they could match that level of intensity and performance and belief in the league as well. Going into Sunday, obviously, against Hearts, who have not had a great start to the season, maybe just starting to turn the corner, but let's be honest, they've not been in any kind of great shakes. It should be another opportunity again to maybe use other players who haven't had an awful lot of game time. Players like Danilo spring to mind, maybe giving him a start and trying to ease him back into a position where when we do have that really intense run of fixtures in December and into the new year as well, and big games obviously in Europe, and we've got a couple of old firms in there. We've got a League Cup final to look forward to. We're going to have Celtic at Ibrox. Those are massive, massive games that we're going to need the entire squad to be available for. We can't have any passengers going into these months. So if we can try and use that opportunity to get players like him back to match sharpness, because we all know that's different just to being fit, then we'll be in a really good place to come back and hit the ground running post international break as well.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, Hearts sitting 11th in the table. As you rightly say, they have not had a great start to the season. Obviously, Stephen Naismith was shown the door, and since then they've been able to try and bring in a slight resurgence, able to get a point out of the Edinburgh Derby. And the thing that is interesting to me is there's some parallels there between us, because Hearts obviously playing within the Conference League. They've had a couple of good results in there. They'll look to be able to try and come to Ibrox, and I think that they'll certainly play to their game and to their standard. They're not in a position, and this is why sometimes it's difficult when you play against clubs at the lower end of the table, because their players may be hungrier, they may be sharper, they may be, they may have a greater desire to win. What we need to do, however, is ignore all of that and be able to try and replicate the same levels of performance that we saw against Olympiacos, and been able to not put ourselves behind the 8 ball early doors. So I don't think it'll be an easy game by any stretch. I'm certainly not saying that. But what I am saying is that when this Rangers team can start motoring, it is capable of producing results. And we have mentioned St Mirren, we have mentioned Motherwell. And again, in the interest of parity, I want to be able to say that, we were able to produce those results even after setbacks. But taking into account, obviously, our own European performances, I'm hoping that Thursday just gives us that lift that we need. Ibrox, it's a shitty kickoff time. It's 5 o'clock on Sunday. And by the way, before I forget, because I'm certain I will, if anyone's going to the game, the subway is going to be open slightly later as well for people coming back and forth, just in case you weren't aware. That'll certainly help, I'm sure, with the tendencies, Ross. But by and large now, we'll have at least a decent bit of recovery time. We will obviously turn our attention to Hearts as soon as possible, but right now it'll be getting the players home, getting them rested up, and then we'll obviously start to go a little bit more in depth in terms of where we think that Hearts can come out against us. For me, the most important thing is just to maintain our self-belief. And you mentioned the run of fixtures that are coming up really between now and the end of the year. I see the most immediate fixtures post the international break as ones that we should certainly be looking to take something from. But right now it's about getting into that international break and just going into and keep maintaining the feel-good factor, and we need to be able to do that with a win against Hearts at Ibrox.
Yeah, and it's possibly where I would want to start seeing the quality of Rangers and the quality of Rangers facilities really come to the fore there, because as we speak, Hearts are obviously playing Heidenheim and holding them to a 0-0 draw, which would be a fantastic result for them, and you're right to say that they've had a really good European campaign so far. But if Hearts do hold out in that game, or indeed go on and win that game, the amount of physical and mental effort and exertion it will take them to do so will be quite remarkable. Then you need to go to Ibrox on Sunday. If we can get an early goal and put them behind the 8 ball early, Cammy, then that physical and mental tiredness will probably come to the fore for them, and we can give ourselves a much easier Sunday evening, what we might otherwise have. Can go completely the other way as well, by the way, to be totally honest. If Hearts go and nick an early goal at Ibrox and the crowd gets on the team's back, then we could be in for a real slog that evening. But you'd like to think, with the fact that this is a side broadly that is used to playing European football, a side that is used to the travel, used to the recovery, very much in a groove with it. Hearts have had European campaigns in seasons gone past, but that is still a relatively new experience to them. It's a small thing, but it's those marginal gains that might stand us in good stead on Sunday. But broadly speaking, you're right. Just get through Sunday, put us into the international break in a good frame of mind, and then we can pick it up for a really tough run when we come back from that.
Any changes you'd like to see made? Primarily, I would assume including the involvement of Yanis Hadji.
I think the big one that I would like to actually see on Sunday, notwithstanding the Danilo shout that I'd mentioned earlier on, is I would actually like to see Casemiro start in the right back position, not because of any fault with Dujon Sterling, but as I mentioned earlier on, I do think there's maybe a slightly different skill set there with regards to what you need domestically versus what you need in Europe. And I want to give Casemiro that opportunity to play those types of games, to be able to get forward, to see what kind of deliveries he can put into the box. And if we have a striker like Danilo there who can get on the end of them and be clinical in a way that Dessers just sadly isn't, then absolutely fantastic. But I want to see those kind of relationships and those kind of partnerships develop. Hadji is one that might well come back into the side there, Cammy. Obviously that issue with him has been resolved, and the manager does want to see what he can get out of Hadji. I think we all want to see Hadji succeed at Rangers. He's very much a fan's favourite in that regard, so he might be one that the manager will look to just for a wee bit of fresher legs, given the shift that Diamande in particular had to put in against Olympiacos. But I think Casemiro and Danilo are my two big ones for Sunday.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mentioned Hadji just purely because obviously we can't use him in the Europa League, so it'd be good for us to be able to try and give him a bit of a kind of domestic run out, which I'm hoping that sees him getting some regular football as much as he can. I am not one of those aforementioned fan favourites of Yanis Hadji. I think that if we were able to play him and then get a move for him in January, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of it. Danilo's an interesting one though, because I think you're absolutely right. I think that Danilo did play a role in what turned out to be the winner against Motherwell at Hampden last weekend, because I think his movement on the ball is far better than Dessers. he needs to be able to try and get some proper game time into his legs as well. So yeah, it will be interesting to see that. And I think the big thing for me now is it'll be interesting to see how much the manager is going to stand by this Tavernier decision. I am fully behind it, by the way. Dijon Sterling was taken off against Olympiacos, we believe, because of sports science reasons rather than, any fears of injury, which makes total sense. And as you say, Casemiro could offer us something slightly different in there, but I would maintain his run of games as well. I would want to be able to try and see him involved for a good portion of the game as well. So yeah, very much looking forward to that. Well, listen, that will do us on this week's Extra. As we go into an international break, it's always a bit of a gutter for me, Ross. I know obviously you go to the Scotland games, etc. But yeah, for me, I like the international break if it's a case that we need players come back from injury. But if we're hitting a decent run of form, it almost feels like it always comes at the wrong time.
The good news for you is it's the last one for a while.
Good.
And I think once we get this November international break out of the way, then you really get to the exciting stuff, I think, in a season where you do get into the Christmas round of fixtures, and we have that League Cup final to look forward to. We've got Celtic at Ibrox, got massive European games, obviously against Spurs and away at Man United. There's a lot to look forward to, so just hang in there, have a wee weekend off, and then I think we'll all be up for it when we come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, that will do us, folks. David will be back with Flagship on Monday to unpack the Hearts game as well. As we've mentioned, you get loads of content, including our post-matches, on our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/Heart and Hand. Please jump on over there if you'd like to check it all out. There's loads of great content on there, Rangers-related, football-related, and just some stuff and nonsense that's in there as well for you as well. If you just like to have a little bit of a downturn in the international break, fair play to you, but we can provide you with your regular Rangers fixes in the meantime. Thank you to our executive producers, Mike Lee and Paul Myers. Thank you to our show sponsors, NordVPN. Thank you all for listening. And for me, thank you very, very much for my brilliant guest this week, Mr. Ross Hutton.
It's always a joy, Cammy. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, folks. Let's get 3 points at Ibrox on Sunday, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.